Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Emmitsburg, February 1st, 2016 Town Meeting. At this time, I'll ask anybody in town in the meeting who has, oh, very good, the flag's right, who has a phone, I'll ask you to either turn it to your silent mode or turn it off if you would at this time. Just confirm that if you'd be kind. Okay? And now I will ask us to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we do have a full docket this evening. We have a full agenda. We are going to modify it modestly, so be mindful of this. We have listed our audit report as the auditor is a professionally paid individual. We're going to hear that audit report first related to the town finances when we get to the agenda. We will then discuss the additional plaque, potentially, the possibility of the additional plaque. We are going to rotate item 3, the public hearing, with number 4, the public discussion of Pembroke Woods, so we can address that sooner, so we can get everybody on their way in an appropriate manner. For some regular items, here we are. Our next town meeting will occur on March 7th at 7:30 p.m. The Parks Committee will meet on February 16th at 7:30 p.m. On February 8th at 7 p.m., the Community Heritage Day, folks will have a meeting here. Okay, in the conference room here in the community building. Okay, any other meetings to be announced? Okay. We have our next item, approval of the minutes from January 20th, 2016. Does anybody have any modifications or notes or changes they want to see made related to that item? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I make a motion to accept January 20th meeting minutes as presented.
Very good. Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Very good. The motion has been made by Commissioner Sweeney and seconded by Commissioner Mellor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Okay. We now move to our commissioner comments. Mr. Ritz.
I just wanted to say hats off to Mr. Click and his crew for the snow removal. I had a lot of snow, obviously, last weekend. And my only comment at this time pertains to the development areas of Northgate and Emmett Ridge 2. It's my understanding that those areas are contracted out to another group to clean the snow, and I must say it's a striking difference in that area compared to the rest of town. I've heard a lot of complaints, drove up there myself. It is really noticeable. So I don't know if in the future, if that particular contractor can't keep up with the snow removal, perhaps we should look into another group to clean that out.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mellor.
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Sweeney.
Yes, I also want to thank town staff and Jimmy and them for their snow removal, and also him personally because he also housed a couple of the employees so they could work around the clock to keep the snow, and they could sleep in between and take shifts. So he did a really nice job, and I'm grateful that you let them stay in town. They didn't have to go home. Also, Silo Hill, I had a call in for a complaint for the, at the stop sign near the playground area. The snow was so high on the one side, they had to pull out halfway out in the street to get around the corner. So maybe you want to check that out to see how, well, it might have melted down some now, but she let me know over the weekend. I told her I would mention it at the meeting because you were going to be there. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, sir. Mr. Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sound like a broken record. Again, just thanks Jimmy to all the town staff for basic snow removal. I know long hours put in. You know, at night, I wake up and I see that light blinking as it goes down the DePaul Street clearing the snow, and I know you guys are out there doing the job to get it done. Also, just like to acknowledge myself and the mayor attended the ambulance company banquet this past Saturday. Again, thanks to the ambulance company for the invitation, the hospitality, great food. Again, as I mentioned before, anyone on the board who wants to have access to the county government, County Executive Jan Garter attended this banquet also, and she was there for questions or anything about the snow emergency event in Frederick County, and she's always very accessible at these different events. I also like to thank Jerry Donald. He is one of the county councilmen who, back in the budget sessions for the county, uttered a really classic question when one of the fellow councilmen unfortunately made the possibility of cutting $1.8 million from the budget for snow removal, which was the entire budget of snow removal, Jerry Donald asked the particular question, what if it snows? Well, obviously last week we saw what happens, and thank goodness cooler heads prevailed and kept the $1.8 million in the county budget for snow removal. So thank you, Jerry Donald. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you, sir. Okay, yeah, hats off to town staff. By Saturday morning on the 23rd, I was able to get into every neighborhood. I try to do that to make sure if a safety vehicle can get in there, and every road was accessible. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't curb to curb, but it was fully accessible for large vehicles like a fire truck, for example. So that was pretty darn impressive given the speed with which it happened. What I did see was a lot of volunteerism in town, and I, for example, saw some young men from Mount St. Mary's and Silo Hill clearing neighbors who weren't able to do it for themselves. Very pleased about that. I did contact the university with their names and share that, my hat's off to them. I know sometimes there's tension and static, but that was a nice moment where these young guys, they had a hard option and a soft option, and they picked the hard option and they made the best of it. So that was nice to see. In the neighborhoods of Brookfield, Pembroke Woods, and in Northgate, I saw volunteers literally roving about trying to help out their neighbors with snow blowers, with shovels. Very impressive. I'm sure it happened in other neighborhoods. I mean, if that's just a sampling, I guarantee it was in every neighborhood, and that's really one of the finer qualities of our community. The other side of it, I did get feedback. I'll say one negative complaint, very strong negative complaint, to 4 strong praises for town staff. So a 4-to-1 ratio is a pretty happy thing, I think, for all things considered. The complaint was related to clearing sidewalks and curb-to-curb clearance in the cul-de-sacs in in Brookfield. So I'll talk to town staff to follow up on that. And more or less, that ends my comments. So now we move on to the mayor. Mr. Mayor?
Excuse me, thank you very much. I had, again, it's on the snow that the county executive reported that this was the worst 3-day snow event they've ever had in the county in history. And we were way ahead of, I'd go down to Frederick and you couldn't get through side streets, as Commissioner Blanchard would know too, that we were way ahead. We got through, it was open for safety and for convenience for all our people so they could get out to the main roads and get down to work. And staff did a terrific job. And I talked to them at all times during the day. I did attend the 27th Annual Emmitsburg Ambulance Company banquet with Commissioner Blanchard, his wife, and my wife Libby, and Sheriff Jenkins was there, and Community Executive Jan Gardner was there, and it was a wonderful evening. I attended the 2016 Mount Athletic Hall of Fame luncheon on Saturday, which was followed by a game, basketball game, a very exciting game, and there, 3 of the previous recipients were Dick, Ken, and Dave Swamley, all of Emmitsburg, who were they were all in the Hall of Fame for soccer and track and everything along those lines. South Seaton Avenue sidewalk project that we thought was coming last spring is scheduling now for March and April of this year, which is good. It's the kind of getting us in, drilling down finally. We waited anxiously to get the square rolling, and this is a wonderful part of that. There are 3 separate programs that are going to be going on here. There'll be the square and Main Street and the bridge, and also Seaton Avenue, with all the sidewalks will be replaced in town, and eventually they'll get up to North Seaton. Let's see. 5, website update, like a presentation to the board on at the March meeting. It's going to be interactive. We waited for this, but it's taking time for training and then gearing up for it. We're hoping to have here within the next couple of months texting and email alerts to anybody who signs up in here. So when that pipe that broke up on the mountains late in the afternoon, you get a text, what the water's going to be a problem. GIS, graphic information systems for our total town. There'll probably be a presentation here. Planner separately met with the county, and so did Jerry Muir, and we have that now. So there's a lot of those things going on right now. Doughboy update. We are told that it should be back in place by no later than the middle of March. So that's what it took so long to, we couldn't touch it. Then we had to put it out for bid. But once we got to the point where we contracted somebody in December, it's gone pretty quick. And again, we're very sorry for the inconvenience and it took 2 seconds to knock that thing out, and it's taken us 6 or 7 months to get it back to where we hope we'll be there. So I want to put that out to you. Solid Waste Forum, public forum. We have a landfill that's supposed to be full by 2033. And County Executive Jan Gardner put a task force together, which I serve on, and they're having public forums. They had a professional put together the forums, and they'll be this Saturday at 10 a.m., February the 6th. And I really encourage all the commissioners to go to this at 10 a.m., Thurmont Library. And that would kind of keep us going here. I've got some other things here. Do you want me to keep going or
Sure.
Okay,
I
quickly.
mean, if you feel this is the time.
Okay. The Scott Row Barn, we're working on that, getting an RFP out for the salvation of the timber, and we're going to save and put a second floor, knock off the first floor of the barn there, and also cover the lower level for to keep cattle out there, keep the use out there. East Lincoln sidewalk. Last year we did get the right-of-way agreement with Dr. Brim Gardner, so we're from Seton to Chesapeake, and we're going to extend a sidewalk all the way down to Creamery Road, and hopefully if we get the MOUs from the state, we waited on for 3 months now. We hope to have that in this spring. Pool, we'll have a contract for you all for your approval or disapproval next month at the March meeting. That will be here, and that should be pretty good. I know Mr. Muir from our staff is meeting with people from the Mount and the county next week on the trail connection from the Mount to the town. And let me see. Dog Park, I have a presentation scheduled for the Parks meeting on 2/16. Mr. Muir and myself, and we'll make a presentation there of what we've got and how we're starting to price it out. The Square project will now include Route 140 from Timber Mill to North Avenue, and from there, from North Avenue on out to Sila Hill Road, it will be part of the bridge project. I think I brought that to your attention. That sidewalk is scheduled to be bid out in December of 2016, and construction starting in the spring of 2017. There will be a public meeting in March. It's handled by the State Highway Administration Public Affairs Department. And we do not have a date, but we will be advertised, and we'll try to get all that information to you as soon as possible. One other starting, the bridge, from the information we have now, the good information we have now, the bridge construction will commence this fall 2016. And that's assumed to be a 18-month, they're calling it 18-month program. But as you all know, that they can't build during trout season. So it can get a little hectic there. I think that maybe rounded up. Public meeting, okay, I think I've got everything there. Dog Park, FEMA, we've finished got the easement approved and recorded, and the line is turned on for the new water line. With the solid waste meeting, this forum this Saturday, you'll learn about zero waste, organics, resource recovery parks, county recycling, and refund on beverage containers are just a few of the topics. It's a serious dilemma. Our landfill's filling up, and we're sending trash to Virginia and Pennsylvania. And that can get really expensive and is not too dependable for the future, I would say. I think that's it. Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Great. Okay, thank you, Mr. Merrick. That's quite a comprehensive list. It's good to hear. I'll direct this to staff. Do we have the sign-up list? Could that be brought forward if you don't mind? What I'd like to review is if anyone has signed up for general public comments. I'm not aware of that when I looked initially, but I just want to make sure. No, very good. Okay, so as we have no one signed up at this time for public comments on general topics, we're going to move now to administrative business. I'm going to bring one item forward and with our agenda. Thank you. I've been approached by the Moore organization that they're interested in applying for a trail grant for the grant cycle of 2017. And I'm hoping that the commissioners will have no issue with that. Does anybody have a concern with that nonprofit applying for a grant to help us continue our trail program? Anybody have any concerns? Okay. So, any consensus here? Mr. Sweeney, are you okay with that? Commissioner Miller, you're okay? Commissioner Ritz? Okay, very good. Mr. Blanchard also? Very good. Commissioner Blanchard, okay, good. All right, so I'll contact them to follow up to their contact and say that we will give them the go-ahead to apply on our behalf. I mean, they're doing it, and they're going to bring it to us, which is kind of a nice setup. So again, it means no money spent from the town to build the trails or to maintain trails. Okay, moving forward, we go to consent agenda, and this relates to the Citizens Advisory Committee. Mr. Ritz, I'll bring item H to you.
Sure. You all met Wendy Walsh a few weeks ago. She was probably about 3 meetings in a row. I haven't seen her in a public meeting since due to conflicting schedules. However, she has been sitting in on the Citizens Advisory Committee just to check things out. Very interested, new to the area from California. She works over at FEMA, and she had to get some approval. She got that through her supervisors that she could be a member of this committee and is looking forward to helping out and doing more for Emmitsburg.
Great, thank you, sir. Is there a motion to appoint Wendy Walsh, to the Citizens Advisory Committee?
I'll make a motion to appoint Wendy Walsh to the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Very good. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion's been made by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner Blanchard. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? None. The motion carries 5-0. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for bringing her to our attention.
You're welcome.
Okay, we now move to our reports. Commissioner Blanchard, the treasurer's report, sir.
Yes, Mr. President. Town of Emmitsburg cash activity as of January 27th, 2016. $3,397,388 cash balance January 1st, 2016. $3,573,098 operating balance forward. And as always, the top 10 checks, the vendor names, descriptions, check dates, and check numbers. If there's any questions, I can help anyone with.
Any questions?
No.
We'll see the snow check soon.
What's up?
We'll see the snow check soon. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, that one's going to be a
Right,
big
right.
one. Yeah, that one, remember that from previous years.
Okay. Any other questions for the treasurer? None? Okay, so we move forward. Okay, thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Next report, yes, goes to the Planning Commission. Mr. Sweeney?
I wasn't at the meeting because I was also pushing snow for Harrod County at the time of our big snowstorm, but I'll give you a little summary here that Susan had given to me. It's we had a reorganization of officers. So the new officers for the Planning and Zoning Commission will be Patrick Boyle as chairman, Keith Surdick as vice chairman, and John Howard as secretary. On the agenda, they had 2 ordinances regarding setbacks for accessory structures in residential zones, and they had 4 ordinances regarding changing a name of the open space zone to institutional zone, plus needed text amendments, which we'll have some of them as part of our agenda tonight for our public hearing.
Great,
That's
okay,
it.
and that's the report. Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions for the Planning Commission liaison? No? Very good. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, we move on. Okay, our next items are our agenda items. So now we turn to the auditor. Welcome, Ms. Mills.
it's different.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for inviting me this evening to present the 2015 audit results. The audit, I knew that would happen. I'd lose my voice as soon as it was my turn. The audit was completed in late October and submitted to the state of Maryland by its required due date, so I'll begin with that. We were engaged to perform a financial statement audit as well as a single audit for fiscal year 2015. And I've highlighted here on this slide that a single audit is required when your federal grant expenditures are greater than $500,000. I do want to point out that that will be increasing next fiscal year, and the new threshold will be $750,000. I always like to remind everyone of the individual responsibilities. Again, the financial statements are the responsibility of management, and our responsibility as auditors is to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement, and to issue an opinion on those financial statements. The fiscal year 2015 audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. And the town received an unmodified opinion on their financial statements. Unmodified meaning good. Each of you were provided a complete copy of the audit report, and included in the audit report is the management's discussion and analysis, also referred to as the MD&A. I would just like to comment here that that is prepared by the management team. It has a lot of really good, useful information and provides a nice overview, so I would encourage each of you to read it. You've heard me say this numerous times. The GASB reporting model requires two sets of financial statements. On pages 9 and 10 of the audit report is what's referred to as the government-wide financial statements, and beginning on page 11 is what is termed the fund-level financial statements. Again, the audit report is probably close to 50 pages, and I have prepared a few slides of what I think are the most important things for you to know. New in fiscal year 2015, the town was required to implement a new GASB standard entitled Accounting and Financial Reporting for Pensions. This was rather significant. It required restating your opening net position. It required the town to record its proportionate share of the net pension liability as a participating governmental unit in the state's retirement system. And that the town's proportionate share as of June 30, 2015 was just over $448,000. So this is new, would not be on your prior financial statements, and this liability is being allocated between the governmental activities and the business type activities because it's reflective as to where the staff are spending their time. I mentioned that we're required to report two sets of financial statements, and the first one is the government-wide financial statements, and there are two specific statements, the statement of net position and the statement of activities. The statement of net position is on page 9, and the statement of activities is on page 10 if you want to make a note to it on the slide. The statement of net position is presenting the financial condition of the governmental and business type activities of the town. The first slide here shows the total assets of the town as of the end of fiscal year 2015. The total assets are just over $42 million. And you can see by the pie chart, 86% of those assets are for business type activities, which would be your water and sewer activities. And the remaining 14% is your governmental activities, and that's just about $5.8 million. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see that that's about an 11.6% increase over fiscal year 2014. And the very bottom of each slide, too, there is a reference back to the financial exhibit for future reference. The total liabilities for the town at the end of fiscal year 2015 were just over $8.9 million government-wide. Business-type activities were $8.1 million, comprising 91% of the liabilities. Governmental activities were 9% and just over $837,000. That was about a 10% increase from the prior fiscal year. I mentioned in this slide some terminology that's new and different to a governmental unit, and that's called deferred inflows and outflows of resources. And again, at the very top, I've provided the definitions. A deferred outflow of resources is a consumption of net assets by the government that is applicable to a future reporting period. And in your particular case, it's the pension. The totals at the end of fiscal year 2015 for governmental activities was just under 39,000, and for business type activities, it was just over 28,000. A deferred inflow of resources is an acquisition of net assets by the government that is applicable to a future reporting period. And for the town, yours was related to the pension as well as unearned revenue. And you'll see at the very bottom, the governmental activities comprised about 147,000, and your business type activities was just under 54,000. So here's how the little equation works. You take your assets plus your deferred outflows minus your liabilities and your deferred inflows, and you get net position. At the end of fiscal year 2015, the governmental activities net position was just over 4.8 million, and the business type activities net position was just over 28.1 million. And here it is in a pie chart. The total net position was just over 33 million combined, 28.1 for business type activities and 4.9 for governmental activities, and that was a 12% increase over fiscal year 2014. The second required statement is a statement of activities, and it presents a comparison between direct expenses and program revenues for each program or function of the town's governmental and business type activities. This next slide specifically highlights the governmental activities, and in the very first column, you'll see the total expenses. And the total expenses were just over, and I'm even having a hard time reading that, so let me go to the total expenses were just under over $1.6 million. The charges for services were just over $315,000. There were operating grants and contributions of about $99,000 and capital grants and contributions of about $30,000. In the very last column is the general revenues, and that's where your taxes are, your real estate taxes, your property taxes, local taxes, as well as your county tax equity. And you'll see that's just over 1.3 million. The next slide gives you the quick snapshot of your business type activities, where you'll see that the total expenses for your business type activities total expenses were just over 1.2 million. The charges for services were just over 1.5 million. We had significant capital grants again this year of 3.6 million related to the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, and we had a small amount of general revenues. Your change in net position on page 10 is just over $4 million combined. We had an increase for governmental activities of $118,000, and we had an increase for our business type activities of 3.9, again, largely because of the capital grant. The next several slides are looking at things from a fund level perspective. The town has a number of funds that it uses to account for its activities. The governmental funds include the general and the capital projects fund. When you're looking at this, it's a very different measurement focus. When we're looking at things from a fund level perspective, we do not have assets that are being capitalized. We are not depreciating assets. We do not reflect any of our long-term debt. So the numbers are significantly different, and it's also required that there be a reconciliation between the fund level statements and the government-wide. So this snapshot looks very different when I was talking about $40 million, and now we're looking at total assets of just over 2.1 million. Our liabilities about 119,000, our deferred inflows of about 118,000, and the difference between the assets, the liabilities, and our deferred inflows is something called fund balance. There's multiple categories of fund balance, and you'll see that the largest amount is in your unassigned category at just over 1.1 million. But the total fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2015 was just over 1.9 million. Our total revenues from the fund level perspective were just over 1.7 million. Our expenses were about 1.6 million, and our excess of revenues and other financing sources over expenditures and other uses was a positive 165,000. This slide takes us from a fund level perspective when I said that the excess of revenues over expenditures were just over 165,000 to the change in net position that I spoke about earlier when we were looking at governmental activities. And so here are the adjustments to get to fund level, from fund level to government-wide. We have debt service expenditures, which would be your principal payments on your debt of about 31,000. We have depreciation expense that's being reflected on your government-wide financial statements and not on the fund level of about 196,000. We have capital outlay, which would be fixed assets, something that we're placing in service and capitalizing, of 130,000. The compensated absences is just the change in your accrued leave balances if all of your staff were to be paid out their earned but not taken leave of about 14,000. And then there was a net pension adjustment in the current period of about 3,000. So again, we went from a fund level excess of revenues over expenses of a positive 165 to a change in net position on page 10 for governmental activities of 118,000. This next slide attempts to do the same thing when we talked about the fact that the governmental funds had a fund balance of just over 1.9 million. But yet, when we talked about net position for governmental activities, we were talking about almost 4.9 million. And you'll see the significant adjustments that take place to get from a fund level to the government-wide presentation. The largest item sitting there is your property and equipment net at just over 3.6 million. You'll also see down towards the bottom the long-term debt, the compensated absences, and again, the new net pension liability. Okay? This next slide takes a look just at your governmental fund revenues, comparing the current period to the prior period. And you'll see that for property taxes, there was a slight increase year over year. Our income taxes honestly stayed about the same as well. We did see a drop in our intergovernmental revenues from 601,000 in fiscal year 14 to just over 501,000 in fiscal year 15, and that's largely related to grant activity. Our service charges went from 220 in fiscal year 14 to just over 271,000 at the end of fiscal year 15. So again, just gives you a little bit of a snapshot how it compares to the prior year. This next slide does the same thing on an expenditure basis. You'll see that our general government expenditures decreased from 578,000 to just over 537,000. Public safety, relatively about the same. Public works, pretty much the same. We did see a slight pickup in our recreation and culture, and our debt service stayed about the same. The next several slides take a look at the proprietary funds, and when I use the word proprietary funds, also be thinking about your business type activities. Business type activities by its name means that the purpose there is to generate income. It's a profit-making model. So when we're looking at the water funds specifically, you'll see that the operating revenues did increase year over year. There was about a 5% increase from fiscal year 14 to fiscal year 15. Our operating expenses actually had a slight decrease year over year, about a 5% decrease. So at the end of fiscal year 14, looking at the water fund, we had an operating loss of just about 47,000 to a operating income in fiscal year 2015 of just over 9,000. So a positive trend there. Here's a quick snapshot of the operating revenues and expenses for the sewer fund. You'll see that there was a significant increase in the operating revenues for the sewer fund. Our operating expenses stayed about the same, and at the end of the year, we had significant operating revenue as compared to the prior year in the sewer fund. The next slide just gives you a quick snapshot of how you fared against your budget. So the first column shows the original budget that was adopted by the mayor and commissioners. The revenues were just over 1.7 million. The expenses were expected to be just under 1.5 million, and we expected to transfer about 223,000 to the capital projects fund to have a net change in fund balance of 0. There were no budget modifications made during fiscal year 2015, so therefore the original and the final budget remain the same. And then the third column over shows our actual revenues and expenditures. Our actual revenues were slightly under budget, 24,000. Our expenses were under budget by about 52,000, resulting in a net change in fund balance of a positive 29,000. As I mentioned, we were required to do a single audit in fiscal year 2015, and in addition to auditing the financial statements, we were also required to look at the internal controls over financial reporting and compliance. We are required to communicate to you if there were any material weaknesses in internal control, and I provided a definition here. A material weakness as defined by professional standards is a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal control such that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement will not be prevented or detected and corrected on a timely basis. There were no material weaknesses identified during the most recent audit. There were no instances of non-compliance that were required to be reported under government auditing standards either. We were also required to look at the compliance requirements that were applicable to the major program and look at the internal controls over compliance in accordance with OMB Circular A-133 because we were subject to the single audit. You'll notice there's the definitions provided here are slightly different because it's focusing on internal control over compliance versus internal control over financial reporting. And we're talking about a material non-compliance versus a material misstatement. So the definition's primarily the same, but the focus is different because we're doing different things. At the very bottom, we've indicated that there were no material weaknesses identified. The program that we tested in fiscal year 2015 was the waste and water disposal systems for rural communities. And the CFDA number that's listed here is the federal number that's provided to us and to the town each time you're awarded federal dollars. So that tells us what compliance requirements we need to test when we're auditing these programs. There were no federal award findings or question costs identified during the most recent audit. Any questions?
Sure, I'll get my annual question in. Did you find staff forthcoming and cooperative through the process of discovery, looking for this information?
Absolutely.
Great, okay. The other item is, I think 2 years ago, there was a question related to a double signature control for a fiduciary item, like not a checkbook, but something. No issues with that?
No issues.
Terrific, okay, very good. Great. Any other questions for the auditor or related to the report?
I have a few questions, however, just first time looking at the audit report tonight, I feel that I would like to refrain from asking those right now to better formulate my thoughts. Perhaps it would be best to direct those questions to Mr. Tabler if I have any questions pertaining to the audit.
That'd be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Just remember that there are two sides to it. As Mr. Tabler is the one more or less managing what is being audited, you might want to direct your questions to the auditor as opposed to the audited.
Certainly, I could
depending
be
on-
available by conference
Sure.
call if that would be helpful. Maybe we could do a three-way conference call, if that way you have both of
yeah.
us on the phone.
Or if it's just a simple, depending on the nature of my questions, perhaps an email to both of you. Copy one,
That would be fine.
just for courtesy purposes. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions for the auditor or related to the report? No? None? Great. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for your comprehensive presentation. And I would expect questions forthcoming, so thank you. We're grateful you made yourself available.
I mean,
and-
and I would be more than glad to come again if you felt it was necessary.
Great, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Taylor, also.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, very good. Okay. We move now to the presentation related to the possibility of an additional plaque at the Doughboy site. Okay, Mr. Briggs, is that you
What's that?
for agenda item number 2?
I think it's Mr.
Oh, a request. I'm sorry, I'm backwards on that. Okay, very good. All right, and therefore, we turn to our signatories. We have Mr. Wood and Mr. Ling signed up. Is there a preference who goes first? Great. Good evening. I'll ask that you please identify yourself, you give us your address, and then the floor is yours for our time.
My name is Fred Wood. I live at 22 Pleasant Acre Drive in Thurmont. I am representing American Legion Post 121, the Francis X. Elder Post of Emmitsburg. The reason we're here tonight is that the American Legion has got concerns about the new plaque that has been talked about on the Doughboy. To be honest with you, we think since the Doughboy's accident, there's been a lack of communications between the town and the veterans groups. We take the Doughboy, as most veterans do, very personal. It's a historical statue in Emmitsburg, and we lived on rumors for a while, if you understand that, what was happening to it and stuff like that. The mayor was kind enough to come to our last meeting and explain some of the bureaucratic stuff he'd been going through, and we appreciated that. And then we were told of a new plaque that had been authorized, or was in the making, or what's the word you want to use?
It's being considered.
Considered,
It's
thank
in discussion. There's no decision about it whatsoever.
And that's what brings me here tonight. Sure. I was asked by the commander to come here and represent the Legion, and to kind of work together with the town on the Doughboy, see if a new plaque is needed, or a better explanation of the plaque that's there. This statue is almost 90 years old, and like I said, it's a main point in Emmitsburg, because you always tell somebody to go to the Doughboy and turn right or left. So without the Doughboy, I guess a lot of people are getting lost. But anyhow, that's our concern.
Sure.
So we understand that plaque was put on there in 1927, and the society we live in was different then. And it was a segregated society, and we believe that even though these men lived in that society, they were treated more like second-class citizens. They still thought this was a country worth fighting for. And I think that's what that plaque proves. If you want to take not the negative way the plaque appears, but take a positive way the plaque appears, that we can explain to people that there were people of color that fought for our country, even though some of us would have questioned why, but they didn't. So that shows their courage and their character. So, and this is the first time I've had a chance to look at this.
Yeah, I understand.
So that is our feeling on it. That's my feeling on it. I think that the commander and the American Legion feels. And we're very happy to hear that it will be back by Memorial Day. Because, as you know, we always have a service there on Memorial Day at the Doughboy. It's one of the main services we have, along with certain cemeteries. So are there any?
I think what will happen, just so to sort of clarify process, we've listened to yourself, we're going to listen to Mr. Ling, and then we're going to comment on sort of the overview, unless the commissioners want to address it, Mr. Wood's comments right now. Typically, we take both and then move forward sort of with a collective. And then the other part is, because we're discussing this item, it's a discussion item, no decisions being made tonight, nothing's being proposed. There's a likelihood of a dialogue. So procedurally speaking, when we have the dialogue, we ask that you talk to the commissioners or to the mayor, not to town staff. It's directed to us, and we move from there. So, does that help?
Yeah, and in the future, while we are talking about the Doughboy, I think the American Legion, I think they speak for the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, we'd like to be kind of a part of it. We realize the town owns it, it's town property, but it's very dear to us, and that's why we're concerned about it.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Okay. Mr. Gene Ling. And again, if you'd please introduce yourself and give us your
Yes,
address.
my name is Gene Ling. I live at 37 Park Drive, Emmitsburg. I'm a lifelong resident of Emmitsburg and very familiar with the World War I Memorial. Just to follow up on what Mr. Wood said, it had already been established that the monument's going to be repaired and replaced in its original site. So it kind of came as a surprise. I'm representing the VFW Post, Memorial Post 6658, by the way. It came as a surprise to the Post when we read in the paper that there was going to be an additional plaque. We wondered why and what it would say. I see here a copy or an example of what it might say. It had already been established in previous meetings by our commander, Mr. Marty Williams, who is related to some of the African-American gentlemen in the bottom of the plaque. And it was determined that the name should remain there. It's part of culture and it's part of history. And say it was a surprise when we saw that there was a second plaque, and we thought, well, why do we need this? And is it to explain why we're doing this? If you created a new monument today, all these names would be in alphabetical order, as they should be. But since that was the culture and history at the time, the names should have and are going to remain as they are. I personally feel that to list them as it's going to be listed, it shows a badge of courage. It shows that there were some men of color from Emmitsburg who did fight in World War I, and that is appropriate. So the main concern was we didn't know what was going on. We simply read in the paper that there was going to be an additional plaque, or thinking of a second plaque. At our last meeting at the VFW, we discussed this. We sent representatives, as Mr. Wood came from the Legion and I here from the VFW, and we determined that we did not feel that there was need for a second plaque. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Just for clarification, the source where you read that there is going to be, absolutely going to be a plaque.
It was in either the Emmitsburg Dispatch, the Frederick Post, or the Thermont, whatever one of those papers, when they were talking about the ongoing saga of the Doughboy and where it was going to be placed and how it was going to be repaired and when, and all the ifs, ands, or buts. There was a mention or a paragraph or a sentence indicating that there was a suggestion or mention of a second plaque.
Good, okay, I just
And
want to
that
make sure.
came as a surprise to the
So,
veterans.
I'll kind of start with that, and we'll go forward from there, and I don't want to leave it open to all the commissioners. I agree, communication, I think that's vital to what we're trying to get done, and I would kind of put forward that, for consideration of discussions and moving forward, there might be value to a committee to have folks involved, including folks who are members of the American Legion, the VFW, and folks from the community also, just as a thought. My biggest fear is always, something gets killed in committee. That's not what the intent would be. It's just sort of to have sunshine on the issue. I don't know the newspaper articles per se. I don't know that I read anything that said this was an absolute thing. So no decision by this board has been made. It was a discussion item. I mean, well, not even to that qualification. It was sort of openly discussed. When I say a discussion item, that means it's something specifically on the agenda that gets talked about. I don't want to frame it that way because that would be inaccurate. But it had been brought up and it was talked about. How about that, for the sake of clarity? But there was no absolute decision on it. The other side of it is there have been multiple views on the board, some in favor, some not in favor, and the premise was, is there a need for a social commentary or a need to kind of recognize those individuals? And it kind of reinforces what you're saying in part about saying it is a badge of courage. And I think that was one sentiment. The other sentiment was there wasn't a need for it and that it speaks for itself. So those, I hope, characterize the discussions. And on that, I think I'm going to step back and let other commissioners step forward to kind of present, because my goal is to have everybody have that opportunity to be heard and to have dialogue here. So first of all, thank you both for coming in.
Just one more thought.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
I understand where you're coming from.
Sure.
But if the original monument wouldn't have been damaged by the accident, would anybody given any thought to going up there and placing a second plaque or memorial describing the way it existed at the time?
That's a good question, and I'll jump on that. I'll say this with no uncertain terms. I do visit that, and I kind of get honks and stares and waves. I tend to clean it up. I've asked town staff to go there. Town staff has cleaned it up. I try to get there before the holidays, like Memorial Day, for example, to get the flower bed going. I've replaced the box myself. I've done it with former Commissioner Joy. So I do know people have been involved there. And I do know that both organizations have done similar things, policed up the area. So I do know that there is interest in just seeing it better maintained. And I think there is some, there is some visibility to that issue. So I don't think it's an invisible issue. So just to answer your question. Okay. Commissioner Blanchard, Commissioner Ritz, Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Sweeney.
I don't have questions. I just have the comments afterwards.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming in, both of you, please. Sure. Commissioner Blanchard.
All right. First off, for the record, again, my name is Mr. Blanchard, Glenn Blanchard. I'm a resident 243 DePaul Street. For the record, I do have to state that I'm a 8-year veteran of the Armed Forces. I'm a 15-year member of the Post-121 American Legion, SAL, and I'm also the grandson of a World War I veteran, true-born, who served in France in 1918. And talk about having a connection to that statue, a very strong connection. Obviously, visited my grandfather's grave in Dickerson, Maryland, quite a few times. Put a flag there every Memorial Day. With 1917, well, actually with 2017 coming up, we're approaching the 100th anniversary of America's entry into World War I. And you asked about the question was, would there be any interest in the statue if it had not been hit by a car? In the back of my mind, I was kind of hoping that that Emmitsburg would get involved. And one of the papers I handed out was the United States World War I Centennial Commission. This was established in 2013. This is the paper everyone has on the desk. I'll make sure it gets entered into the record. This was an act of Congress in 2013, and members of a 12-member commission was appointed by the President and the Senate and the House of Representatives to basically study World War I and try to commemorate it. Commission's plan to develop and execute programs, projects, and activities to commemorate the centennial of World War I. Over the next 5 years, the Commission has a number of jobs that wants to get accomplished. The one I thought seemed most resonant to the town of Emmitsburg was to bring attention to the thousands of World War I memorials in communities across the country that honor Americans who served in the war. So, was kind of thinking about this along the line. I got to admit that they actually kind of pushed it a little bit forward faster than I thought it would. But with next year coming up with the centennial celebration, this is an opportunity for the town of Emmitsburg to get involved in this. Now, just putting forth some ideas, any sort of, if there was any signage at all in a plaque, whether it be attached to the statue or on the ground next to the statue, it would need to be sort of devoid of any sort of negative language, discrimination, segregation. The more I thought about anything attached to it, and I did type this up today, and I'm kind of thinking about this, that, if the town of Emmitsburg puts something there to say rededicated in 2016, say something, as positive as you possibly say, to say the separation of these soldiers' names by race does not diminish in any way these individuals' service, bravery, or dedication to the United States of America. Period. Stay away from the term of discrimination, segregation, just a self-explanatory sort of something next to it. Now, the reality is, I've stood on that corner and looked at where that statue is located, and I thought to myself, do you put something there and risk the chance of someone getting hit by a car trying to go across the street to read this statue, not only the plaque on it or a separate plaque? So I thought, well, maybe that's not the right way. Maybe that's not the way to go. So this is one idea. The other way to look at it, and there's a number of photographs I handed out to individuals. These are photographs of Civil War memorials located around Gettysburg. And if you ever go up to Gettysburg or Antietam, there's lots of interpretive signs all over the place. And when I go online, look at the United States World War I Centennial Commission, what they're in support of is not changing any of the signage, by the way. I understand Bob Rosenthal's idea. I think his heart was in place, but there is no support, actually, to change any of the words, the verbiage, or the names on the list. That's pretty well accepted. But there seems to be quite a bit of support from National Park Service individuals and also from historians for interpretation signs to try to explain World War I. Whether or not where the statue is located is a proper place for that, based on the fact it's such a tiny piece of land, I'm not sure if that's the place. Maybe at the community center, as we probably grant funding over the next 2 years, maybe there would be funding for signage like what I passed out, showing possible ideas, explaining what is a doughboy statue, when was it erected, who does it actually honor, what does the term doughboy mean, explain the history behind the name, why are the names separated, not everyone understands what was happening during that time period, as you stated. Who is a Francis Xavier Elder, the namesake of American Legion Post 121? Explain his life in Emmitsburg and his sacrifice to his country. I was pleased last night when I came up to the post to see that his stone, I understand his stone was restored during 2015, but that his older stone has been saved and put actually by the Legion Post, which I think is the appropriate place for it. Talk about treatment of African American soldiers during the war. This would be the opportunity in 2016, 2017 to get along with the Centennial Commission and maybe talk about some of these things. We are at the heart of the Civil War, so there's plenty of information here on the Civil War, which should be. But this is to be the one opportunity, I think, was for us to get involved in the centennial celebration of World War I. The commission was involved in this. I feel pretty confident as I reach the half-century mark, I probably won't be around for the 150th anniversary of World War I. But I feel pretty confident I'll be around for at least the next 2 years to see maybe some commission work with signage dedicated to the doughboy statue, dedicated to Francis Xavier, dedicated to those individuals. Rather than just put a plaque there explaining those three individuals are separated, why don't we contact the descendants of those people and say, look, what information do you have? Where do these people serve? We do know that African-American troops did serve in France in 1918, and they might have been in locations actually near where Francis Xavier served. In fact, it might have been in support operations. So, maybe find some information and kind of go more with this. So when people come to the library here or to the town office or to the community center, they can actually read about World War I rather than try to, unfortunately, risk their life and cross the roads and go to the center square and look at this tiny little statue. Not tiny statue, but the plaque there. But again, there is no support, basically, to change the verbiage on it. We're looking at multiple websites. No one really supports the idea behind that. But the idea of a small plaque would be not to take away from the information that's already there, but again, just to honor those individuals who were separated either on the back of the pedestal or maybe just something on the ground. The fact that it is getting rededicated in 2016. Keep it small, keep it simple, something to the point. If that's not supported, okay, then maybe some signage, interpretation signage, again on the community grounds that could talk about Emmitsburg's involvement in World War I and talk about what's happening here. I mentioned also the treatment of German Americans during the war. Unfortunately, the United States has a long history of xenophobia and sauerkraut. If you study this, sauerkraut was called Liberty cabbage during that time period. Emmitsburg has a long history of German Americans in this area, especially if you go to the different graveyards. Do we have any documentation? Excuse me. Documentation of ill treatment of German Americans in Emmitsburg during that war. Unfortunately, America does have that sort of history during wartime of treating individuals that we're at war with not so well. There's plenty of information in the Maryland Room down at the Maryland Archives in Frederick to explore Emmitsburg history and determine what kind of language was used. Are there articles about this? Again, as I tried to tell you at the beginning of the meeting, these are ideas. These are ideas. I do think this is an opportunity to get involved with the Centennial World War I, whether it's in the form of a plaque or if it's in the form of interpretive signs. It's a chance, an opportunity for Emmitsburg to sort of be proactive rather than reactive and explain the role of Emmitsburg in World War I. And again, this is sort of like a unique sort of window of time to get involved in this, where there probably will be a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Commission money and so forth. They get involved in actually paying for this. I'm not looking to put any sort of dollar amount on this. I'm just looking for a window of opportunity for Emmitsburg to take and look at the Great War. And I got to admit, this is not completely objective on me. I am the grandson of a veteran of the Great War, so I would like to see some more signage actually in Emmitsburg to honor those who served during that time period. I will say for the record that my grandfather did not serve at Emmitsburg. He was in a unit from Virginia, so this is not a personal issue for me at all. But I would like to see something done with that. So that's what I got.
Very good.
Mr.
Very
Mayor?
nice
Okay.
Presentation.
Okay, very good. Mr. Sweeney?
Is this mine?
Yeah, that's yours.
I don't have anything to add to Glenn's thing. I know that I heard from both the VFW and the Legion and the AMVETS veterans, and they said they would like for it to stay as is, and they didn't want an extra plaque. So I don't know about the signage, extra signage being put at the community center here, or looks nice on the paper here, and it does explain. So I don't have anything. I mean, I have a position taking on not putting some information signs here out front. I don't have any problem with that at all.
Okay. Commissioner Miller?
Perhaps the kiosk that's at the square.
Mm-hmm. I kind of thought about that too,
There's a
but that's why I
panel.
had.
Aren't those panels interchangeable, and perhaps that would be a place to start.
That's why I had the one image on the one page that showed the possible kiosk type pictures of that nature. Something that might talk about Emmitsburg's history with that. But again, just ideas. But I really think this is a point, a juncture where Emmitsburg could kind of get involved with this, with the centennial celebration. By the way, they do plan on actually redoing the entire monument in D.C. at Pershing Square. I don't know if any of you have been down there, but it's a monument dedicated to the Great War, and they're actually completely redoing that monument in 2017. So it's going to be completely new and talking about the different involvement of the troops and where everything else. So there is quite a bit of work being done over the next 2 years for the centennial of World War One. So
Great.
that's what I got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blanchard.
All right.
Commissioner Ritz?
Thank you, Commissioner Blanchard, for your presentation this evening, and thank you to our veterans who presented this evening as well, and for supporting our community and everything that you do. I feel that, I guess in the future, when we consider potentially a second plaque or other signage for interpretation, maybe that would be a good chance for a public meeting to have more input from both sides. Whichever direction that we go, I don't really have any opinion or other questions or comments at this time to add, but I feel that maybe more community involvement with that would be beneficial.
Great, okay. All right, anybody else? Okay, sure.
I just want to finish up with, I'm glad that the statue is coming back up. I'm glad it's going to be there hopefully by the springtime for Memorial Day. I hope both American Legion and VFW will participate in services, laying a wreath, flags, etc. when the statue's there. I'm not personally attached to any of this, and again, I respect Mr. Wood and Mr. Ling for coming forward tonight and talking about this. But as a veteran, and as the grandson of a veteran, and as the son of a veteran, I do think something needs to be said about it. What is to be decided yet, but I do think that we shouldn't miss this moment, is what I'm trying to say. It's an opportunity that exists. Right, sorry. I didn't mean to take a second.
Okay, no, sure. I guess on the full disclosure side, I teach U.S. history. I take history very seriously as my profession. I think it's a profoundly valuable thing, and I feel we try to honor our veterans, and I feel our veterans bring honor to us in their endeavors. My grandfather was in the Emmitsburg area. He did leave the Emmitsburg area. He left the area for his education early because he was admitted to medical school, and he went to become a field surgeon during the war. So that's sort of a direct connection. And Mr. Blanchard, my hat is off to you, because, I mean, this is a contentious issue, and I think you've provided a pretty viable thought here. And I would ask our veterans to please give this serious consideration as you bring this back to your communities respectively. I don't think we're looking at this as the divisive thing, and I think that's perhaps where the communication gap created a problem for us. But moving forward, I know that efforts were made. I know the mayor did approach the organizations and did speak at one. I do know that we had the public forum, and we walked through a timeline of why the Doughboy hadn't been addressed in a speedy manner because our hands were tied by the state. I know that's not satisfactory, but I know that's what the reality is. Beyond that, I think the concept of interpretive signs is a really appropriate and academic way to address this. My biggest fear, and this is, I don't know, maybe too editorial, I fear that and I'm bringing this into the classroom a little bit, but I don't want us to lose sight of our values as a nation by missing the facts of our history. And it is an absolute fact that we were segregated. I don't want to sanitize our history. But I think by taking an interpretive approach, I think there's a lot of good that could come from that. So I'll ask that you gentlemen, if you would, please again, seriously take that back to your organizations respectively and ask for that to be considered. I think the way it's being phrased, and I don't want to interpret this, Mr. Blanchard, so I don't want to speak for you, but that an interpretive sign would not be on the triangle.
Yeah, it's just too small of a piece of
Correct,
land.
but-
It's just too small.
But potentially be at the square, as Commissioner Miller might be suggesting. And the other side is, I think maybe following what Mr. Ritz said, there's room for input. I mean, that maybe we do sit down as a committee where we do have representatives from the VFW, from the American Legion, and from other members of the community, so we can drive this and give this consideration, okay? And that is open-ended. So, just a thought. Any other thoughts? No? Okay. All right, very good.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, anything you want to add or conclude with? Nothing?
I think we all should get together as a committee or different groups represented,
Okay,
clear up the communications problem.
okay. So, Mr. Wood, thank you, very good. Mr. Ling, comfortable with the thought? Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. I think we're ready to move forward to our next agenda item.
Yep.
Is this okay, gentlemen? Great. Thank you all for coming in. That's appreciated. Okay. very
Thanks for
good.
coming in, guys. Appreciate it.
We move now to our shuffled agenda item. I'm going to ask that Mr. Moore come forward. Mr. Moore, if you don't know, is the president of the Homeowners Association of Pembroke Woods. He did come forward and he approached me on this, so there were some concerns that he had related to maintenance items in the community in Pembroke Woods. And town staff, I think, is also going to address that. Mr. Click, is that accurate? Or Mr. Mayor, I should, sorry. Am I-
Mr. Muir and Mr. Click are here. If you go ahead and address
Okay,
it.
all right. Sorry, don't mean to put you guys on the spot. Mr. Moore, thank you. And introduce yourself, give us your address, and move forward from there. Sorry.
Kendall Moore in Pembroke Woods, HOA. I represent the community.
Street address, home address.
4030 Carrot Court.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me over and hearing this. There was just some maintenance issues that I wanted to bring up to the town on regards to the roads, as well as some lighting, as well as I think the fire hydrants. I took some photos. I took some walk around, some other satellite views also on some items, and presented that to the town, showing what the maintenance was of lack of. And I think it's been 10, 15 years, somewhere close to that, since the roads were actually put in, where we've had multiple plows and so forth go on, just the weather deteriorating the conditions of the roads. So I just wanted to see if the town would have someone come out and view that and talk about resealing the roads, doing some repainting, some basic stuff like that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moore. We have Mr. Muir. Would you like to address this? And we also have Mr. Click here. You want just? I think there have been visits out there already, and that's already been taken care of.
Mr. Muir, before you speak, I'm going to just throw in.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, that's fine. Our town manager, Mr. Haller, would typically be the individual to address these. So Mr. Muir is kind of pinch hitting at the moment, stepping in on his behalf. Mr. Haller did prepare a document, basically, talking about what's been addressed and the potential for timelines. But Mr. Muir, are you in a position where you can maybe flesh this out a little bit, or
Well,
do you need the letter, or do you have this with you? or-
Yeah,
No, I don't have his.
Okay, all right. This is,
Oh, no, I do.
oh, you have the same thing, okay, all right, very good, okay.
That's mine.
Okay, all right, yeah, I just want to make sure you had that. Okay.
Yeah, and the issue is, I mean, as you know, as it says there, Jim and I went out and went through the development pretty thoroughly, and we agree with Kendall. There are some maintenance issues out there that need to be addressed. But there are maintenance issues everywhere in town that need to be addressed, and Jim does maintain a list and has a list of neighborhoods that they're going through. Right now, they're in Northgate and painting some of the fire hydrants and things in Northgate. We had a budget for road work last year. I think they did your court, Carrick Court.
They
Some of it.
lined up you and told me to call Jerry to ask him to come out and look at it, because they need more work than just resealing a couple of little lines.
You say Jerry, you didn't mean me.
Oh, I'm
did
sorry.
you?
Yeah.
The other Jerry,
That's the reason why.
Yeah, and part of that is there became a sidewalk issue, as you may be aware of this year along East Lincoln. We wanted to build a sidewalk along East Lincoln.
sure.
And some of that money was pulled from that road repair budget because we thought we were going to need it to do that sidewalk, the asphalt on the sidewalk. Now we're waiting for an MOU from the state of Maryland, which will give us $45,000 under a Safe Route to School program. And we may be able to use that money to build the sidewalk instead of that 45. And that 45 will then be able to go back into the road budget above whatever we have next year. So we're working on that. Let's see, we talked about children at play signs, Mr. Moore. And as you know, we do have that one international sign there, the kids on a seesaw. I'm reluctant to take that down because that is an international sign. I mean, people recognize that. But Jim and I did talk about it, and we can get 3 children at play signs and put one in front of each of the courts, Carrick, Pembroke, and Stonehurst. We'll put one at the entrance to each of those courts, children at play, and provide some more protection there. All the streetlights in Emmitsburg are 40-watt LEDs. All of them are, except the ones downtown. They're actually 30 because there's more of them. They're closer together, and that's just the standard that we've had. It seems to work well. I know with those new LED lights, it's a different glow. I mean, it is a different glow, and they do brighten up as they kind of warm up. And Mr. Moore, we don't have a problem with updating the community entrance. Well, you and I have talked about this a couple of times, right? And we don't have any problem with updating the community entrance signage there. We're kind of reluctant to put anything on the town street lights, but other than that,
Why are we reluctant about, I'm just curious about that, like, I think they were called like feather signs or something that attach to
Yeah, that's
the
what
light
I'm
posts, something akin to that. Is there a stability issue or a structural issue regarding the signage, or?
I don't think so. I think it's more of just a maintenance issue. I mean, they get,
Right from the get-go, I mean, people started putting having sidewalk, like having yard sales and taping this and
Yeah.
that, and it's just,
we do have part of the code that says you can't put anything on it.
Okay,
City street light.
sure.
I mean, that's.
Has that happened on Main Street where we have the signs, like for the memorial service? Like people start taping stuff up when we have the stuff posted up on the signs, do we know? You know what I mean?
we got banners we put up.
Right, that's what they're talking about, banners, I mean,
The same type of signs that you have up already, that
that right?
are 8 feet tall.
okay, wow.
I mean, or up.
Oh, this is, 8 feet above the ground, okay, all right.
Correct.
8 feet tall might be a bit much, but, okay, well,
I mean, that's something I
Sure.
think you all would have to take.
Correct,
under
right,
advisement.
Signs attached to the light posts? Is that what we're talking about?
Correct.
Like the banners
that's
that we
what-
have on Main Street?
Correct.
In Pembroke?
not on all of them, just at the entranceways, is that what the thought was?
To say
And
what?
for Brookfield Road?
Pembroke Woods?
Basically to identify the neighborhood, because people do have difficulty finding the neighborhood. So, you know, that's a great question. The Pembroke Woods sign is actually 2 stacks of bricks with a gate between them, and it says PW. It doesn't even name the neighborhood. Whereas I believe Pembroke Woods does have something that says their name. But it's as silly as it might sound, there's actually an issue. I mean, I know people who've driven by more than a few times, so I definitely get what you're saying about that. But again, that's something for the board to consider. I don't know if we need to do it right now, but we'll let Mr. Muir work through the.
Yeah, but again, I mean, if you wanted to put up another one of those gate kind of signs or hitching post signs, we don't have any problem with that as long as it's in HOA territory, the backside.
That was the thing, since Ryan turned the roads over to the town.
Mm-hmm.
Before they were private, when they originally
Right.
planned. So once they turned them over to the town for maintenance as well as, that now limits any work or any signage to be put on the lamps or anything else.
Yes.
Once that had happened.
Yes, but-
Back 10+ years
Right.
ago.
But you still have some HOA areas over there by the trails and stuff.
We do, and there's
you could put.
also the, I think like the flag one that they have the Pizza Hut,
Mm-hmm.
type that they stick out as well. Only thing with those is kids do put stuff against those. Kids
Oh, yeah.
do hit those and play with those, and you do get
Yeah.
stuff posted on those versus like what the town had coming through. This was part of the suggestion as the town's been moving towards recognizing the communities as well as doing the entrance. This could be something that the town might want to decide later down the line. Let's look at this for all the 5 communities here. Let's designate that these are the signage that you come into the neighborhood. You can recognize that this is that particular one.
Sure.
Right, I mean, we do have a standard where it allows community identification signs. I think they're 8 square feet. Or something, the sign itself, the sign size is 8 square feet. But, I mean, we can work through that, we can talk about.
I had photos.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Very good.
you think we can talk about the signage, you know, at another time. I think that you're gonna have to look at the code if you wanna put up a banner
Okay.
out there. And again, as far as it goes with this hydrants in the streets, I mean, we agree with you, Mr. Moore. We
Those were
we
the
agree
main
with you.
things for coming to ask.
But-
The other stuff was
Okay. So
But-
hydrants are a priority.
the exit onto
Well, Brookfield,
Irishtown Road.
yeah, that's a county road, I think we mentioned that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exit there as well as where the ice and water sits.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've put we're gonna put a thing into the county roads, ask them to come out and take a look at that intersection, see if
Great.
they can't do some grading.
Okay. So the county's in the equation now.
Well, they haven't got back
Well,
to me.
sure, but that's good. No, that's
but
good.
they're
That's
notified.
progress.
And,
It's better than we were a little while ago. So thank you.
and
That's
like
good.
I said, Jim has the hydrants and the road repair on radar, but
Sure.
it's
Sure.
I
there's
have
a lot of
question.
targets.
Okay.
Is there any special skills or training or knowledge or certification you need to paint a fire hydrant?
No, but you need time.
Okay, but could we explore some sort of service group, I don't know, Boy Scouts, what was the?
Sure.
the-
Volunteers. I mean,
Yeah,
if they get checked
yeah.
out by town staff,
Who
we'd have to
was
ask.
that?
Well,
Sorry.
We've had actually, people do, we server for us, did a couple hires for us.
And you,
We would get somebody there to, watch them take rust off, but, yeah, you don't need.
and do they have to be stripped down at all, sandblasted? I mean, what?
Like sand it all.
Okay,
grinder type
okay.
thing, and like I said, I have, so Jerry,
yeah, there's a lot of
hydrant before that, and getting to them is just the thing, we get to them when we can. The streets, we get to them when we can, we done sealed some out there, I fixed the intersection, that whole big intersection, we get blacktop. But like I said, that sidewalk took the money up, but
Sure.
everything on this list is on my list.
Okay.
And the only thing I would say about the fire hydrants, I think that's a great idea. But insurance keeps raising its head, so that would have to be checked before we could send somebody out there
Sure.
to do something on town.
That's a pretty good idea. And
Yeah, it is a good idea,
It's a
actually.
good way to address the liability too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Muir, thank you very much, and appreciate it. Mr. Click, also, thank you very, very much, both of y'all. Mr. Moore, any other questions for the board?
No, this is exactly what I just wanted was
Okay.
to bring up.
Okay.
And there was no deadline or anything that I was saying that the community's asking this to be done.
Sure.
January, February, March. It was, let's put it into the budget, let's see what we can do as time goes. I know there's other expenses that happen.
Sure. Well, maybe we can get the Pembroke Philanthropy Society on the wire brushes and,
Well, it's just one of those things that individuals complain.
sure, oh, sure. Yeah.
And they say, well, what are you doing for me? And that's the only thing that I'm coming back saying, hey, I did present this,
Sure.
I did present the sidewalk going right to Brookfield, I did present repair work, and now just step back, we're waiting to hear.
Sounds like a commissioner.
They can watch TV if they want.
People complaining to the poor guy? Very good. Okay, commissioners, are we okay to move forward, or any other questions or comments?
I just one question, I guess, directed to Mr. Click. The next door to Pembroke, Brookfield, there was an individual in Brookfield specifically asking about the hydrants as well. I'm assuming that's on the schedule, maybe like right behind Pembroke then?
Yeah, 'cause like I said, there's 2 or 3 other developments at Northgate's really bad, on Solid Hill. But I have everything on the list, it ain't like I'm not getting to it.
Sure.
No, understood.
My 37 page, so, everything's on the list, so.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Very good. Very good. Okay, all right. So, we now move to what was flip-flop from number 3 to our number 4 item on our agenda. Okay. Okay. So, I'm gonna wait for the mayor to return, and we'll go to our public meeting mode.
You wanna
Or do you just
adjourn
wanna
this
move
meeting and
forward?
Go to public hearing? Do we have to adjourn the one and go to public hearing?
Isn't that kind of, yeah, that's what I'm trying to,
Oh, okay.
No, we
Okay.
can, this can be the public hearing.
hearing?
It's been advertised.
Okay, we
You're-
can stay where we are.
Yeah,
But
just,
do we need to adjourn, like end the one and move to the other? No? Procedure, okay, very good.
Just
All right.
acknowledge that you're you're
Okay.
having it.
All right, so,
Springtime.
does anybody have any issue if we move forward as a commission?
No, it's only about 5 minutes, let's keep going.
Say it again?
I'm just looking at the clock, let's keep rolling.
Okay, all right, so here we go. All right, we now move to agenda item number 3. This begins a public hearing for ordinances 16-01 and 16-02 and 16-03 through 16-06, related to modifying open space to institutional. Ms. Sipperly, we turn to you.
okay. There are actually 2 sets of ordinances here. The first 2, you've seen before, and you referred them to the Planning Commission. They related to a citizen's request to modify the side setbacks, particularly in the village zone. Staff took a look at that and came up with a draft ordinance, which then went to the Planning Commission. They met last Tuesday, couldn't meet Monday because of the snow. So Tuesday, they took a look at what had been provided, and their major comment on it was that they thought it was too broad brush. It let there be 3-foot sidebacks throughout any residential zone, like in the R1 zone and the VZ zone. So, in their opinion, we should treat it the same way as we did with car canopies a couple years ago, where we said that if the lot is 30 feet in width or less, you can have some special consideration. So what I'd like to do is just go through ordinance number 1 there and just tell you what was changed at the Planning Commission meeting. In the first paragraph, we added that accessory structures may be placed inside or rear yards but are not allowed in any front yard as defined in 17-04.020. And that's already in the ordinance, but we wanted to make it perfectly clear in this section. And what we did was, any accessory structure shall remain 6 feet from the side lot lines and 6 feet from the rear lot lines. And then the bold language there says, where the lot width existing as of September 1st, 2001 is 30 feet or less. You can have an accessory structure that is less than 150 square feet in size. You can have that at least 3 feet from the sideline. And this was just to provide, we've got some lots in the village zone that are like 18 feet wide. They just cannot possibly put a shed 6 feet from each side and still be able to walk through their yard, or it's just not a great place for the shed or the swimming pool. And the object of having at least 3 feet from the side lot lines is so that you can at least get a lawnmower through there, and so that it doesn't send rainwater onto the neighbor's yard and that sort of thing. So we went with a 3-foot, staff went with a 3-foot setback, and the planning commission agreed with that, but they thought it should only apply to lots that are 30 feet wide or less. We also added some specifications that no more than 30% of a rear yard can be covered with accessory structures, and only one structure can get that. There's a provision for a 0 lot line for a car canopy or a garage, as long as you have 6 feet on the other side. And that you maintain, you can demonstrate a 6-foot wide path from the rear of the lot to the principal structure. That's just for emergency access. It doesn't have to be along one side or the other. It just has to be that you can get through there in a path that's at least 6 feet wide. And basically the same thing on the other. One was for the village zone and the other one is for the R1 zone. Any questions?
Sure, any questions for the planner related to these two? Sure, Mr. Ritz, sorry.
I have two questions, and one, I do apologize. I was looking through my notes here. There was a letter I remember from a Ms. Lynn Orndorff regarding this, I believe, and this is what transpired, this revision to the ordinance. And I noticed that she is not here this evening, so number one, I'm assuming this addresses her concerns for placement of a shed in her rear yard, obviously not front yard. She's right along Main Street.
Right.
So that's my first
And she had requested a 2-foot setback, which we thought was too close to the
Okay.
property line.
But
So,
given what she wanted, though, it would be 3 feet now? She
Right.
would still fall within. So
instead of 6, she can now be at 3.
okay.
So it's 3 feet closer than she could have been.
That seems reasonable to me. The other question I have, given the verbiage that was added, and I'm trying to rack my brain around it. I remember approximately a year ago, there was an individual who came in, Mr. French, regarding an outbuilding on his property that he was in violation of an ordinance, and he had to take down some property. So, as it's written now, would he be in compliance or would he still be in violation of the ordinance?
In that case, there were buildings that were over the property line into the neighbor's yard, just because he had assumed that the fence was the property line.
Okay.
And this might, I mean, he could come in, he's taken those buildings down. If he got a survey of his property, and he could now put something 3 feet from the line instead of 6. So it might help him,
Okay.
might not. But I believe it will accomplish what Ms. Orndorff needed. I mean, she didn't, it's 1 foot less than she wanted, but
No, like I said, that seems reasonable to me, and unfortunately, she's not here to address that. But
and I know that she works on Monday nights.
oh, yeah. So
which
And
is
then
when-
thank you for clarifying the other question. My main concern was, the individual had to take down a building. Now, perhaps he's not in violation, but if it was on the property line, then yes, I do understand that. Thank you. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Malley, no. Mr. Sweeney?
Well, along with them lines, I think this should benefit Mr. French also, because his lot is small, under 30 probably, and if he wanted to put a new shed up, he'd have a place to put it now. I mean, he knows
Possibly,
exactly.
I haven't looked at his lot
His
specifically.
lot's, I think, probably less than 30. From what I'm guessing, because it's,
I believe
the
so.
houses are so small there.
Well, one of the things that the emergency people are asking is that we need to get a vehicle access back
Access.
there. So if you have a small lot, that's why that 3 and 6,
Yeah.
Ms. Horndorf's lot would still allow for them to get back there in emergency and do what they can. I don't know about Mr. French's lot.
Oh, I don't know, it might help him,
Sure, sure.
better than what he had before. But I think it works out good for the smaller lots,
Sure.
all around. It'll help them, all the residents all around.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Sipperly, are you looking for something in particular from us? Do you want us to vote on these, or?
If you can make a motion and vote on them?
Okay. Anybody have any further questions before we go before I look for a motion or comments?
And how long were these posted online for public viewing?
They've been up there for, public hearing was advertised, when did we advertise
Oh.
the public hearing? January?
That has to be at least 15 days before this meeting. It has to be advertised twice. The first one has to be at least 15 days before the meeting, and it was a week ahead, more than that. And then the second time was, I believe it was last week. I have we get a certification that it's been advertised. I also wanted to mention on page 2 of 01, the word principal is spelled PLE on the end, and that change should be AL instead of LE, in fact, in both ordinances.
It's changed on the hard copy that you'll sign if you approve it.
Okay. Mr. Ritz, does that satisfy you regarding the advertising?
Yeah, I didn't. I remember seeing it, and I didn't make note of when it was.
It's
But I knew it was.
probably been at least 2 weeks that it's been on the website.
Okay, good,
Under public hearing, draft ordinances, and all of them are on there.
good. Okay,
So it's probably been at least 2 weeks.
thanks.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, okay. Interest to vote. Is there a motion to accept these as modified?
Are we taking all 4?
Well, we've looked at 2, I had thought. Are we gonna have a
No,
presentation?
the other 4 are a different
Those are correct.
topic,
So,
There's 16
Over 02, and then vote on
it'd be
both.
01 and 02?
they're basically the same.
And 03 is a separate entity. It's,
Yeah.
right. Okay,
16-02 is the same thing except in the village zone. 1601 is the R1 in residential districts, which would be R1 and R2. And then the second ordinance is for in the village zone. So basically where you have any residential uses.
If that's being okay, so I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 1601 and 1602 as written.
very good. Is there a second for the motion made by Commissioner Blanchard?
I second it.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Blanchard, seconded by Commissioner Sweeney. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody against? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Okay, so, Ms. Ripley, we now go to ordinance number 16-03.
Okay, there are 4 ordinances here that relate to the changing of the name of our open space zone to institutional. And some of you that were on the board when we changed zoning in our 2010 rezoning, and we took all the park, we took our open space zone and essentially took all the open space uses out of it, the parks, the stream corridors, and low water users, and left a zone that basically had the government buildings and churches and public uses, civic uses in it. And that was still called open space. So it's confusing. And in our recent comprehensive plan effort, one comment that the county made about our land use map was that open space designation on our land use map should be changed to institutional because that's what was in it. So we did that in the comp plan, and then we needed to change it in our zoning ordinance, so that's what this is about. The first ordinance is 1603, and this is purely changing the name from open space to institutional in 2 places. Yes, in just 2 places. If you want to go through all 4 of these and then go back, is that what you're...
I think that there's logic to taking it as a collective, like the group of them, because they all address the same issue of
Right.
modifying the language. So if you want to press on and we just go through, but let me
Okay.
check one thing. Is that okay by the board? Anybody have an issue with that?
No issue.
Okay, so the light is green.
And when I did a search in the ordinance for all the places where it said institutional, I came up with some other sections. One was our forestation ordinance, which is Title 16. And there was some language in there, and you saw this at your first meeting in January. And we discussed these a little bit, and I believe this one was pretty much unchanged. This is our forestation ordinance, and they define an institutional development area. And we came up with a definition of what that would include. One thing we did, just let me... Okay, Planning Commission on 1603, there were no changes. On 1604, it was agreed that we should remove recreation areas and parks from institutional development area and just leave it as the civic, institutional, cultural, museums, churches, and take out recreation areas and parks, because those are now in our conservation recreation zone. So that's one change they recommended, and that change was made in the one that's before you. 1605, on the definition, we said institutional means civic. We had the word institutional in there, and took that out because the word should not be in the definition. And then again, we removed recreation areas and parks from that definition. 1606. We discussed this a little bit at the January meeting, and Commissioner Ritz mentioned that he believed we should have educational in there. We deleted institutional again from this one, and we added schools. So we have civic, educational, cultural uses, and then such as libraries, meeting halls, schools. And then, again, there's another place in that ordinance where OS is changed to institutional.
I have a question about that. You have letter B, parks and playgrounds, golf courses. Wouldn't that go under the recreational use?
Where's letter B?
On page 1 of 3, under 16.6. Should that go under conservation recreation, or is that still considered open space?
We had a little discussion of, I guess if we,
Figure it out. Here.
I would leave cemeteries in. We had that discussion, and other than that, we had discussion of something like a military park, like in Gettysburg. That's a government institutional facility. It's not a park, really.
Right.
But I would say, yes, in line B,
Just take it out.
we should take everything out except cemeteries. Good catch.
Okay, so the modification will just be cemeteries for line B, page 103 for 16-06. Did I get it correct?
Right.
Okay. Commissioner Miller, is that okay by you?
Yes.
Okay.
That said, letter C, wouldn't that also fall under the conservation zoning rather than institutional?
Yeah, I think so.
I would not get too, I mean, for instance, if Mother Seton School wanted to have a nature study, if you wanted to have it as part of something else that's institutional,
I think they have one over there, along there, Willow Run.
along the creek, it's kind of sort of an accessory use, I guess, but
Mr. Ritz, you okay?
Yeah, I mean, I see this as okay, use is permitted, so potential uses in this zoning district. Okay, looking at it in that light, I was more for the consistency's sake, but
I definitely agree with B, that institutional is not, in our zoning, we've taken the recreational part out and made it a separate zone, so.
for interpretation and speaking selfishly, making our lives a little easier going forward, I guess it'd be easier to have this in the ordinance now rather than have someone come forward and ask us to put it in later. So I can see, I'm going to recant my comment and leave number C, letter C in.
Now you've got me thinking about it. A game preserve,
I have no concern right now.
I mean, okay.
Any other commissioners have concerns about item C? Okay. Mr. Plea, any other significant points that need to be shared regarding 16-06?
No?
No? Anybody have any questions or concerns related to 16-06?
No.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What is our watershed considered open space?
The what?
The watershed?
On the mountain? That's in county zoning, so it doesn't get affected by our,
In-town status.
right.
Because that would, because game will be kind of, because they have hunting on it, so that would be game and wildlife. And how about the Scott Farm will be under the nature study because of,
That's also outside of town. So this zoning would only apply to,
and so,
in town.
already.
Okay, any other questions or concerns? Mr. Mayor?
Just while we're on recreation, I know that it's not private, but FEMA has a running course where they can stops, where you can lift weights or, do push-ups. Is that acceptable? It's not private. It's a recreation use.
I would say that's part of that institutional
That's good?
use, yeah.
It's not a recreation, okay.
So
I
it
mean,
does- it
for
doesn't
instance,
exclude that?
A school has a playground, and
Yeah.
FEMA is also outside our town boundary, so the zoning
Right,
doesn't,
that's
but
true.
if, for instance, they were ever to wanna annex, I
Right.
mean,
Okay,
but,
you're right.
those are elements of, but if somebody wanted, well, we won't even go there.
Okay, so for consideration, we now have a set of ordinances, 16-03, -04, -05, and -06. Would you be comfortable as a team taking this collectively? Anybody have a concern, or Ms. Sipperly, do you have any concerns with taking it as a whole on our part? We could break it up if you'd like. It looks like you have a concern.
I don't know whether there's a concern or not, but it'd probably be better if you took them individually.
Okay,
Rather than
all right.
so that each one has been passed, I think.
Before we do that,
Okay.
one question, was there a modification then to -04? And letter B, did we change that?
Yeah, or, wait a second. That's in, 06.
06, sorry, my numbers.
It's the fourth one, but it's 06.
There we go.
We'll get that changed before you sign it.
Oh,
I can change it. Your signature page is a different page, so if you trust me to change it and still sign it, I will.
Board? Board? I don't know, some gray area here.
I'll print it out before you leave.
We'll take the risk, fear not. Okay,
Yeah.
Mr.
That's what
Mayor?
I'm saying, we'll sign the right copy when you're ready.
Sure, I'll have mine initialed to demonstrate what the intent is.
Okay.
Okay, absolute faith. Are there any motions related to these items or any, does anyone have a motion for any individual one of these items?
I make a motion to accept ordinance 16-03.
Very good. Is there a second?
Sorry.
Sorry.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. The motion is made by Commissioner Sweeney, seconded by Commissioner Blanchard. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, I'm sorry, Mr. Blanchard?
No.
Okay, hearing no further discussion requests, all in favor, please say aye.
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 The motion carries 5-0. Very good. Is there a motion for 16-04?
I'll make a motion to accept ordinance 16-04 as presented.
Okay. Is there a second for Commissioner Ritz's?
Second the motion.
Motion, very good. Commissioner Ritz has made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Blanchard. Any further discussion? Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody against? Okay, the motion carries 5-0. Okay,
Taking turns, I'll go with this one.
sure,
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 1605 as written.
very good. Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
The motion's been made by Commissioner Blanchard, seconded by Commissioner Mellor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody against? No? Okay, motion carries 5-0. Okay,
Sorry.
One more.
1606.
Okay, all right. I'll make a motion to approve ordinance series
Tough crowd.
1606 as written.
As amended.
As amended, sorry.
I second.
Very good. The motion's been made by Commissioner Blanchard, seconded by Commissioner Ritz. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? No? Very good. The motion carries 5-0. All right, we now turn our attention to, and Mrs. Sipley, thank you very much. And Mr. Sweeney, thank you very much, and share that with the committee, please. We move on to setting the agenda for our far away March 7th, 2016 town meeting. Mr. Mayor, do we have anything?
Website presentation, and I'm going to put that before you. Second item would be the pool contract, which will need a vote, either accept or whatever. And somewhere along the line, in the near future, we'll have a GIS presentation, but that really has to work with the county getting someone here to present to it. But I don't think that'll be this meeting. It'll probably be April, maybe.
Okay, do you want to put it on and drop it if there's not a need, or?
That's a pretty light presentation. I'd like to put it on here, just GIS presentation.
Okay,
You know, just that it may or may not happen. We have to get coordination with the county.
and GIS stands for
Graphic Information Survey,
graphic or geographic?
graphic.
Graphic,
Okay.
okay, information
It tells you about where all your manholes are and all your
survey, okay.
stuff around town. It's very, very good.
All right, so, and it relates to mapping town resources,
Right. And,
okay? And for the website presentation, would this be the new website presentation?
yes,
Very good, okay, so maybe we should list it as that. New website presentation,
right.
okay, and pool contract for consideration,
Yes,
okay?
needs to be voted on, right?
Okay. Anybody else, Mr. Ritz?
Potential. We still haven't mapped out the actual date, but the Citizens Advisory Committee was tasked to review the nuisance ordinance. I am hoping that will happen here in the next few weeks. So I was thinking that would be a good agenda item for discussion, what came forward. Potential agenda item, if we're able to meet.
Okay, so.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, sure, that's perfect, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you.
Let me share how I'm trying to phrase it and see if it's what you're looking for.
Okay.
I have it listed as a potential item, okay, so we know that there's that variable there. Citizens Advisory Committee report related to review of nuisance ordinance, or Citizens Advisory Committee review of nuisance ordinance.
Review / recommendation of because the task was to make potential recommendations to changing the wording.
Okay, so how about Citizens Advisory Committee recommendations related to nuisance ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
We'll have a staff send out the history of the nuisance to everybody. That's a kind of an interesting little tale.
Okay, so Citizens Advisory Committee recommendations related to nuisance ordinance.
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, that works. Okay. All right, anybody else with any other items?
And then I'll let Kathy know if that doesn't come to fruition in a timely manner. Obviously, we'll just shoot for April. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mayor, anything else?
That's good. If we can just stay for a minute, we need a group picture for the website. Hey, we need your mugshot. Okay.
Break your camera, it'll ruin it. Okay, any other items? No? Okay, one thing I will throw in there is, the possibility of a closed session to follow the March 7th meeting, okay, related to a personnel item. Okay? Okay. All right, so with that having been said, are we fit to adjourn the meeting for the evening? Very good, okay.